Professional wrestling has once again become incredibly popular among our culture's younger generation. But television ratings for pro wrestling were never higher than in the late 1980s, when the marquee names were Hulk Hogan, Randy Macho Man Savage, and Andre the Giant. You may be wondering what WWE has to do with the oikos principle. How about the term tag team? When wrestlers get tired, they have the option of tagging the hand of their partner, and the rested partner would continue the fight against their opponent. However, in the old days, there were times when the wrestlers would tag their partner but not leave the arena, creating an unfair advantage of 2-to-1. This happens often in small groups. An unbelieving member of one person's oikos can appear on multiple prayer lists because that same unbeliever has a relationship with several members of the same small group. And because multiple people are praying for, investing, and inviting that person, God uses this unfair advantage to bring those people into the kingdom of God. There is power in groups. Small groups at your church should be a strategic part of your desire to reach more people. In this next section, we are going to learn how to keep small group participants laser focused on their mission as they tag team with others in their group. So let's jump in and see how we can reach more people through small groups.
In this section, I want to propose how your small groups can become more meaningful by becoming more purposeful. And I want to talk about your groups in light of the overall scheme of world change, as well as your overall strategy to disciple the people in your church. As important as both groups are to the fundamental mission of the church, your oikos and your small group are two different social networks. Yet this is how they are systemically connected. Charles Duhigg, who wrote The Power of Habit, wrote this. He said, "Belief is easier when it occurs within a community. The evidence is clear," he says. "If you want to change a habit, you must find an alternative routine, and your odds of success go up dramatically when you commit to changing as part of a group. Belief is essential, and it grows out of a communal experience, even if that community is only as large as two people." End of quote. Well, if that sounds familiar, it's probably because Jesus said it first. He said that if only two of us come together in His name, He'd be present with us. "Truly I tell you," Jesus said, "that if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them." That's Matthew 18, verses 19 and 20. Jesus said that there's great spiritual power when a small group of believers comes together and finds agreement, which is the goal of both small group conversation and small group prayer. 2 types of influence are required to start a social movement. One is through the oikos, the people with whom you are presently sharing a front burner relationship. Research reveals that leveraging those close ties provides the most impetus for cooperative action, that is, a social movement. But there's a second category of influence that also deserves attention. And back in the 1960s, a Harvard PhD student named Mark Granovetter studied how people found employment. And his research indicated that, as expected, the close ties of personal friendships provided good leads that often led to being offered a new position. But his research also revealed the incredible power of what he called weak ties. Weak ties provide another way to connect. But rather than connecting with friends, you're connecting with friends of friends. People who you might not know very well, but who can provide as much assistance to the cause as your personal friends do. Duhigg picks up Granovetter's theme and describes the power of those weak ties as what we've often referred to as peer pressure. And this is the logic. Let's suppose you know Bob very well. That's a close tie. He's in your oikos. Dave knows Bob well because Dave is in Bob's oikos, and that's a close tie. But you don't know Dave very well. That's a weak tie for you, but a strong tie for Bob. And if Bob asked you for a favor, you'd probably respond as a close friend should. Of course you'd help him out. But what if Dave asked you for a favor? Would you sense the same obligation to Dave? After all, you don't know him very well, which might suggest that you wouldn't feel much of an obligation to help him. But that's not what the research revealed. Granovetter discovered that you might even be more likely to help Dave than you were to help Bob. You'd be so concerned that your relationship with Bob could be harmed if you didn't help his good friend Dave, and by ignoring Dave, you'd run the risk of compromising the respect that he has for Bob because he knows that you're a friend of Bob's, and you care too much about Bob to let that happen. This is what Duhigg concluded, and I'm quoting, "When sociologists have examined how opinions move through communities, how gossip spreads or political movements start, they've discovered a common pattern. Our weak tie acquaintances are often as influential, if not more, than our close tie friends. Individuals with few weak ties," he said, "will be deprived of information from distant parts of the social system and will be confined to the provincial news in view of their close friends. Furthermore, such individuals may be difficult to organize or integrate into political movements of any kind, while members of one or two cliques, oikos groups, may be efficiently recruited. The problem," he says, "is that without weak ties, any momentum generated in this way does not spread beyond the oikos, the clique. And as a result, most of the population will be untouched." He concludes this: "It's a form of persuasion that has been remarkably effective over hundreds of years. It's the sense of obligation that neighborhoods or communities place upon themselves." Okay, that's a long quote. But when he talks about neighborhoods and communities, I'm also including small groups because we want to change the world and it requires both types of groups. The one or a few members of your oikos, your close ties, may also be in your small group. The oikos and the small group are two different social networks. One network, your small group, designed to lend support and encouragement as you engage your mission to the other network, your oikos. But together, the members of your small group, while only forging weak tie relationships, that second ripple of influence, still have the potential to give a movement of God's Spirit the momentum it needs to not only grow within your church, but throughout your community. You'll also notice that there's a relationship between your social habits, engaging your oikos networks, your weak ties, participating in your small group, and your church leaders who tirelessly encourage you to take responsibility for your own people and become the tip of the spear for world change. Add all of that up and we begin to understand the role that small groups play in changing the world for Christ. The gospel is a message that requires all three components to support a social movement. Much like a tripod requires all three legs to support the camera. The movement fails if strong ties, the oikos, aren't leveraged, or if weak ties, a small group, aren't supportive, or if leadership is not willing to give ownership of the mission to the church family. But when it comes to small group ministry within the scope of your discipleship process, it's important to recognize that those relationships in your small groups are only meaningful if the conversations they share are meaningful. Processing information is a lost art. Innovation and creativity, they have an important place in ministry, but they become gods to us. From Haddon Robinson to Dave Ferguson, we've all been warned. Our churches may be so inundated with small ideas, the big one got away. Dave Browning uses the term minimality, reducing the scope of our efforts. It's not that we're trying to reach fewer people, we're actually trying to reach more people, but by doing fewer things. And oikocentric ministry is a laser-focused ministry. That's why I'm such a huge proponent of sermon-based small groups. In the book, I give a number of specific reasons why I'm such a fan. But the bottom line is that sermon-based small groups keep the entire congregation focused on the same ideas. And the fewer ideas that we propose actually seem like bigger ideas. Living the scriptures has always been the goal, not just learning them. So the volume of information we share with our church families is less of an issue than the volume of information they live out. One of my favorite mantras has always been, do fewer things better. But when it comes to information, that mantra actually becomes, teach fewer things more effectively.